Thank you so much for joining us today. Today we have a very important guest, President Putin from Russia.
Hello, and thank you very much for the invitation.
Of course. We do have some important questions for you today. We just want to get some Russian opinion. So our first question is, you've acquired a lot of new territory recently, and both in Japan as well as the Arctic. What are your plans and intentions with this new territory, as well as do you have any other intentions of getting new territory?
Thank you very much for the question, first of all. The debate about the Arctic it's not a recent one. It's not just touching upon Russian interests. Here are involved 4, 5, and even more decades of negotiations among the 5 Arctic countries, including the US, Norway, Denmark, and Canada. However, Russia, as the biggest Arctic country, should and will defend its interest on the global scene. And I personally believe every idea represented, every provocation represented by the Western society, speaking in terms of war, have no solid grounds. And I believe, as for instance the case with Norway, a 4-decade debate upon Franz Joseph Islands in the Lomonosov Ridge in the Arctic has been solved diplomatically according to the UN Charter, and I believe each and every discussion upon a territorial dispute in that area should be following the example of the Norway case.
Of course, yeah. Well, thank you so much. But with getting these new territories, there's a certain pressure to maintain them environmentally. Obviously, you can't let them go to waste. You can't abuse the natural resources relevant there. So what steps are you going to be taking on that front to make sure that you feel like the global community is being considered?
Environmental issues has been, it is, and always will be a concern of the Russian Federation, and we are ready to cooperate with all the organizations involved globally. Certainly, we've been discussing that with BRICS, especially trying to gain as much as we can from Brazilians' experience in social issues and environmental experience, so that we ensure that these 25% of untapped, undiscovered oil and gas resources stationed in the area do not follow the crushing case of the Mexican Gulf few years ago. So, yeah, we are ready to cooperate in these terms with the global organizational society. So,
of course, yeah, thank you so much. Speaking of global societies, you have recently pursued a very intense relationship with China. This has been somewhat of a new development. You guys have been working a lot together. How do you think this new relationship is going to affect your future plans, and how is it going to affect the global economy?
Thank you very much for the question. Touching upon the topic with China, I can considerably state that the relationship between Moscow and Beijing are not recent ones. Throughout the whole Soviet experience, we've been building up a strong and solid partnership. The development road that China has initiated is strongly supported by Russia, despite the Western pressures in that area. We're not talking about China, we're talking about the whole Southeastern Asian area, including Vietnam, including South Korea. What's important, and I need to state that, is that Russian-Chinese relations do not affect and are not touched negatively by the sanctions imposed by the Western society, first of all. And second of all, Russian-Japanese relations have been going smoothly, have been improving considerably, reaching a peak of the relationship between the two countries recently, and Russian-Chinese and Russian-Japanese relations are both strengthening, and their main purpose is to strengthen the stability in the whole area. So yeah, I would like to advocate that.
Of course, yeah, naturally. Most of the world is facing an energy crisis nowadays, whether that be the dependency on oil or fighting new fronts of sustainable energy. This is a big deal, and obviously Russia's been involved in a lot of the organizations that have been put forward to remedy this oil situation and all the other energy crises. And so what steps and initiatives is Russia feeling that they're going to give their time and energy towards?
The global resource crisis is a considerable issue, is a serious topic of discussion by the Russian Federation. The BRICS society that Russia takes a serious part in has been structured, based, and developed mainly upon the issue of resource scarcity. That's the reason why we are mainly oriented in the economic development globally in these developing states, mainly oriented in finding new solutions for the resource scarcity globally. Namely, Brazil's, South Africa's, India's part in resource scarcity problem solution is a main topic of discussion in BRICS. And we, Russian Federation, support that part of these developing states, and we as such, we as a developing state, have a serious part in it too. And certainly, the resource scarcity is a serious issue. However, we should not allow any political, social aggressions to burst out triggered by this resource scarcity. What I mean, in some areas, for instance, where oil has never been an issue, where oil has never been a main source of economic dragging force, and oil has been recently discovered, that triggers a political disturbance. Libya is an example of that, where due to the strong role in OPEC, in the strong oil, on the oil supply scene, one regime has been torn down, has been brought down in violation of UN Charter 73, if I am not mistaken, which has shown that the global society is overwhelmed by the idea of resource scarcity and forgets about basic fundamentals of peacekeeping. So the Russian Federation urges the global society and tries to set an example that such issues, no matter how important and essential they are for all of us, have to stay in the margins of peaceful solution finding and peaceful resolution. So yeah,
of course. Well, one last question for you before we let you go. We really appreciate your time, obviously. As you expand into the Arctic, which as you mentioned is a very competitive area, which has been battled over for decades, how does Russia look to cooperate with other countries as you move forward? Because obviously the Arctic has a lot of research potential scientifically as well as economic potential. So how does Russia going to work to cooperate globally with this new expansion and development?
Thank you very much. The Arctic, as I mentioned, in 2014, we already signed a petition, an amendment, that the Russian territory is going to expand in the Russian Far East, which is a priority interest for us, with the confirmation, with the confirmation of Japan as a result of a long and really hard discussions with the Japanese partners. However, we reached an agreement which brings further stability into the area. the expansion of in the Arctic sure will try to be used as a propagandic measures, propagandic strategies by the Western countries, trying to bring disturbances within the Arctic countries. However, I repeat myself, and I would like to make it clear that any unclear issues in between the Arctic countries should and will be resolved peacefully, diplomatically, upon and with the assistance of the United Nations, which we've always admitted and approved. However, there is something important that needs to be said here, that recently we've signed a mutual agreement with OPEC, namely and specifically Iran and Iraq, for the supply of gas and oil to Japan and China. That even further has the main goal to strengthen first the Middle East, first economically, irrespectively politically and socially, and then try to unite the whole Eurasian area. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, President Putin, and we've appreciated your time and all of your words and information. Thank you so much for joining us today as well. Back to you.